And then who else up here? Somebody else. Oh, Glenn, sorry. Bloomingdale, Glendale. And Bloomingdale. Thank you. There's a bunch of districts that are right. That would line up. Would seem to be the right. 1, 2, like it's 3. Blue, or it's south 88 is this center, and north is this center. And then the way we're doing it, it's all set up by top percent. I don't know. Did you jump on a meeting this morning? I'm not sure if they asked the channel reassignments for us, but it's all based on, nope, it's not based on station. That center. At least for us. I don't know how it is. It'll be the same for us. There's one agency that said no. I think just because he and I never got anything I do. Always gets real quiet.
Well, the time is 7 p.m. Wayne. I'm glad you asked. So we'll call this meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pulaski.
Here.
Trustee Berkshire.
Here.
Trustee Della Penna.
Here.
Trustee Domke. Trustee Lanisa. Here. Trustee Burkowski.
Here.
Trustee Trejo.
And we have a quorum. Could I please have a motion to approve the prepared agenda?
So moved. Okay.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. We'll now move next to Village Board public comment. Anyone wishing to provide a comment on a topic or an agenda item may address the Village Board during this time or public hearing segments of the Village Board meeting by submitting comments in advance using the online form during the meeting. Madam Clerk, do we have any comments submitted in advance?
The first, actually, there's two from Barbara Hotstadt. The first part is, I hope the Village Board will budget for replacing sidewalks that lead to our downtown, especially those along North Prospect Street between Granville and Hattendorf, as they are past their prime and unsafe at this point. Additionally, I hope that all firms working on the downtown area are shown all the arteries that lead to our town center as part of their review process. The National Association of Transportation Professionals states, sidewalks play a vital role in city life. As conduits for pedestrian movement and access, they enhance connectivity and promote walking. As public spaces, sidewalks serve as the front steps to the city, activating streets socially and economically. Safe, accessible, and well-maintained sidewalks are a fundamental and necessary investment for cities and have been found to enhance general public health and maximize social capital. Just as roadway expansions and improvements have historically enhanced travel for motorists, superior sidewalk design can encourage walking by making it more attractive. Thank you for your service to our community and for considering this request.
Real quick then, Kristen, can you address the sidewalk concerns?
Yes, so the sidewalks along the stretch of North Prospect that she's talking about are actually asphalt sidewalks as opposed to concrete. So the cost to replace them is substantial. So we are continuing to evaluate the condition of them and make repairs and other improvements as we have funding available based on addressing other trip hazards and significant ADA issues throughout the village first.
Thank you so much. And I do know one priority that we have this year is we do have some money that the state set aside for Metro parking lot maintenance. One thing that we are actively trying to pursue and will enlist resident support when we get to that point is to try to have that money allocated towards broader things, including pedestrian access that could be used then for sidewalk, things to what Public Works has mentioned. So we're working to hopefully find some additional resource for that. Wayne, do you have a question?
I do recall something, I'm not sure, but there was some legal reason why that was put in as blacktop. And I think we can't really put sidewalks in until we explore what that legal reason was. It was a group from that area that insisted on blacktop and they did it through the courts. So this is what I recall from 6 or 7 years ago on the board.
Yep, there was a court order placed in the village regarding the Town Acres subdivision regarding the placement of streetlights, sidewalks, and curb and gutters to the streets. There is some things that we can discuss with legal to look into that, whether or not the asphalt sidewalk was a part of that, excluded from that or whatnot, we'd have to look into it, but you are correct. And there's still original owners from that lawsuit still in town. So unless we took that to the appellate, that is the order. Madam Clerk?
Also Barbara Hochstadt of Roselle. We tried hard to save the Parkway ash trees in town. I literally do not know what the thought process was to stop treating them because it wasn't communicated. This red X on so many trees tells us their days are numbered. We all thought we had this problem solved 8 to 10 years ago. Strong, direct, and strategic communication would have made a huge difference in how residents are dealing with this issue today. Whenever the treatments were stopped would have been the appropriate time to put the word out to areas affected or a Facebook post. Heck, even something on Roselle Moms would have given people a heads up before the dreaded green hang tag at the door with very limited info, by the way. And the X on the trees. Essentially, these trees were in hospice and we thought they were in rehab. I hope the village will communicate why this decision was made and prioritize a replacement plan with the village taking the heavier burden of the replacement cost.
Aaron, do you want to address those concerns?
Sure. The village started a Emerald Ash Borer program about 12 years ago. At that time, there was about 1,776 ash trees that were broken up into several different programs. One of them was treating them. The other ones were, continuing to monitor them. And the treatment program was planned from 2011 through 2018. We completed that program in 2018, did do an additional treatment in 2021. And we continue to have our forester through Graft Tree Care, who's a certified arborist, evaluate all of the trees within the town for the ash trees. And we're starting to see a big decline of those trees. That program was put into place to extend the program and extend the life of those trees as much as possible, but it wasn't inevitably going to save all of those trees. So we continue to monitor them. That area of town in particular was also where the tornado went to, and we saw devastation with those trees that were not taken care of and taken down. So we're continuing to evaluate that and to begin the trees that are declining and also reforestation in those areas as well.
Thank you so much. Any other public comment?
No.
Okay.
Not for me.
Do we have any members of the public here tonight that wish to make a comment? Let the record show none. We'll now move into new business. We'll start the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget presentation. So I will turn it over to Brian Jonas and Tom Dahl to kick us off. As opposed to the things we've done in prior years, we're going to go through kind of a summary presentation of the budget in lieu of going through each segment individually. So that way, hopefully we can spur more conversation through that instead of each item. So we'll pause at each spot for questions and we'll obviously be open up at the bottom. All of our department heads are here to answer any questions on any part of the budget. So while we're trying a different format, that does not mean that we don't have the ability to dive deep in where necessary. So with that being the case, I'll turn it over to Brian and Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Administrator Belowski, I'd just like to thank the mayor for his leadership, the board for their dedication and time, meeting with staff, putting together this proposed budget, and also for all the work that the management team has put into this document as well. So with that, we'll begin our presentation. So in front of you is a snapshot depicting key revenues, expenditures, net difference, and remaining fund balances for the projected 22 budget and the proposed 2023 budget. As you can see, projected revenues for next year are at a low decrease of 1.3%, and expenditures are at an increase of right around 4%. But the budget remains sound with a positive fund balance, and the board has exceeded its financial policy of 45% in reserves, landing at 55% for fiscal year 2023. With this snapshot, we're going to move into key takeaways from the projected budget and then move into key takeaways for the next year's budget. So for end of year for this year, personnel expenditures are down by around $185,000, primarily driven by vacancies. But with commodities coming in to equate that, being over budget by $165,000, mostly driven by inflation. However, revenues continue to outperform expenditures with sales tax, income tax, eating establishment tax, and building permits continually to exceed staff's expectations and projections. And the board already accomplished a $750,000 transfer to the parking lots and pensions and capital projects funds. However, what we're seeing and trending in the current economy is with inflation and the issues with the labor market and interest rates on the rise, with all of these kind of indicators point towards some type of unknown but expected economic retraction next year. With all that said, the projected budget for this year is still expected to see a surplus of a little bit over $1 million. So for key takeaways for next year's budget, again, overall general revenue decrease that 1.3% shown in the snapshot is primarily due to slower revenue growth that's been impacted primarily by income tax. So state shared income tax is at a 15% reduction. The budget also includes a property tax increase of 5%. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. It's projected at right around $300,000. And then also the second year of eliminating the $300,000 motor fuel tax transfer to the general fund. Thus, the board is prioritized and can sustain more revenues towards related infrastructure projects at around $1 million. And then a small increase to the equipment replacement fund from $500,000 to $550,000, just to deal again with the economy's impact on vehicle purchasing and equipment purchasing and the higher costs that we're seeing at this time. And it also includes the creation of a tourism fund. Thus, you'll see a removal of $125,000 in revenue from the general fund, but it's slated for this new revenue for the tourism fund, and we'll touch base on that a little bit further along. So again, key takeaways continued. Moving personnel costs. So in prior years, the general fund wasn't in the most sound position possible. We used other funds to transfer to the general fund and allocated certain personnel costs to those funds. And because of the sound financial position of the general fund, we're now able to support some of the harder hitting smaller funds that have seen a decrease in revenue, primarily the parking lot operating capital fund. There's the movement of the reforestation program at around $70,000 from the general capital to general fund operating. And then the board continues to adhere to its policy and funding 100% of public contributions to the fire, police, and IMRF pensions. There's no change in employee headcount. There is funding for certain strategic reclassification of employees, specifically in the Public Works Department, the promotion of a senior civil engineer, and then backfilling that position, as well as some increases for community development staff to a new supervisory position. And then what you also see is the funding for the adopted 22 to 2025 strategic plan, which includes multiple initiatives that the board approved with this plan, primarily due to software that's needed for employee engagement, IT assessment, and stakeholder feedback to gauge the public in a more technologically advanced way. So some key budget decisions that went into the preparation of this budget, primarily again due to federal restrictive monetary policy with rising interest rates and unemployment, and again the looming recession or unknown kind of economic retraction that we're most likely going to see next year. Again, property tax increases are less than the actual CPI. So this is the first time that property tax is at a maximum of 5% due to the high rate of CPI at 7%. And then the anticipated impact of the Safety Act on PD generated revenue and fines, primarily to tows, and what that new law will mean on the ability for police to generate certain revenue and fines. Also includes the rate increase of 45 cents for the water, sewer, and CIS rate, broken down by 30 cents for water, 5 cents for sewer, and 10 cents for the CIS, which roughly equates to $2.3 per month based on an average consumption of 5,400 gallons. And then again, the inflationary impacts on the cost of goods and services. So this is something that staff and the board has seen throughout this year and is going to continue into next year. And that's pushing pressure onto smaller funds, primarily the general capital projects and parking lots operating. So there is a increase in commuter parking permits to help sustain that fund for the maintenance and operation of the commuter station, as well as the infrastructure needed to keep the parking lots operational. So some general fund expenditures that are included in this proposed budget, the general village one-time costs. There are some generator maintenance and upgrades scheduled. There's a circuit breaker at the police department that is currently malfunctioning and has to be manually turned off to shut off the generator when it kicks on. And then there's also painting involved for the village hall generator that supplies the village hall with power when power goes out. There's also public safety enhancements included. So there's about 5 preemption upgrades for, these are the public safety lights that are either on traffic lights to help direct ambulances and public safety vehicles through intersections, and then also alert passerbys when ambulances or other public safety vehicles are backing in and out of the fire department, as well as a drone for additional public safety technology that will help in rescue missions and also marketing for the village and other operations, and then speed display signs. So these are the mounted display signs that post the speed that passerbys are driving at, and then allow the police department to reconcile that data and then have better enforcement on certain streets throughout the village. Also included are the village entrance signs. So this is the signs that are at the eastern, western, southern, and northern border, as well as the downtown area. The current wooden signs, and we'll move along into that later in the presentation, but primarily focusing on the ones that are currently within the village's 3 TIF districts, and starting off with those to just have better beautification for people coming in and out of the village. And then also about $100,000 is slated for the Metro 19 building inspections. This includes the actual apartment building that's being constructed. The project itself is about a month behind, but we're looking at some framing to be started here before the end of the year. So the tourism fund, so this is a new fund, and it's primarily driven by the success that the Holiday Inn Express in the village has had. It's had the best year revenue of all time since it's been in the village. And with that comes a different kind of allocation of those revenues to help encourage overnight stays within the village. So that's what this fund is designed to do. And the IT fund, again, IT has been one of the hardest hit industries when it comes to inflated commodities and the cost for services. So there's a roughly around a 22% increase over the projected budget. But those are also driven by, again, the strategic plan initiatives that the board has funded from the adoption of the strategic plan. And then also every 5 years, the PD squad car computer replacements occur. And that's at roughly $70,000 for about 16 tablets. So moving into motor fuel and tax and Rebuild Illinois. So again, the annual street paving and patching program at 1.1 million. This is due again to the board's ability to not transfer MFT fund into the general fund because of the financial stability, and thus we're able to do more road construction projects, which also includes a Rodenberg Road project, which is funded 80% by a federal grant and is slated to be designed, constructed, and completed by next year. For general water, sewer, and equipment replacement, there's $3 million allocated for vehicle replacements. And again, this is a plan. It's something that the board has been aware of, and staff does its best to take advantage of open ordering windows and procuring vehicles at the right time. But it's still unexpected of when certain delivery dates will occur, and the financial policy of the board is to incur those expenses when the vehicles are actually delivered. So 3 vehicles have already been ordered in 2022 for PD, And then we're also expected to have an ambulance and engine ordered, but again, those delivery dates could be in 2023, but we don't have confirmation.
Pause right here. Are there any questions at this point from the board or staff? All right, seeing none, go ahead.
All right, moving on to other fund expenditures for capital projects and improvements. Primarily, this is due to the PD's HVAC system needing a full replacement, and that comes in at around $630,000 that's been approved. And then the Village Hall elevator controls are past their useful life. That comes in at around $130,000. And Village can't be without an elevator. So it needs to get done. And then the History Museum walkway is not exactly sure on the amount of cost that it's going to take. If there's still certain ADA requirements that staff needs to figure out for that, but it is slated for next year and needs to be completed. For street-related projects, primarily this is for sidewalks, paving, and preservation for $425,000. Out of that, about $200,000 is slated for sidewalks. And then the Plum Grove Bridge deck design. This is just the design for this project at $16,000, and then the actual resurfacing is going to occur in 2024. And then again, the priority to place on stormwater impacts for the village at $500,000 between Seasons 4 and Devlin. And still awaiting the status of $1 million federal grant, which we anticipate to get some sort of clarity surrounding that, hopefully by December. For the TIF funds, again, this is where the entry sign replacement design project comes in. So for those entry signs that are located within TIFs or nearby, the village is prioritizing those first. And then the TIF grant program that the board approved last year. This will be its second year to continue at $50,000 for each TIF. And then the streetscape design for Roselle Road and Irving Park Road. This is something that's been talked about in years past, but this is kind of resurfacing kind of a streetscape program to enhance the beautification and walkability of the village's major thoroughfares. And staff will again work with IDOT on other kind of associated projects to leverage this effort the best that it can. So for the East Irving Park, this is the $11 million debt issuance for the parking garage associated with the Metro 19 development, with the debt issuance beginning next year, but then the first bond payments not to occur till 2024. And then for the Roselle Nergy TIF, including $100,000 for designing Roselle Road for pedestrian improvements. And this again includes crosswalks and sidewalk improvements. Staff went out for a grant that was denied. However, putting this capital towards this type of project makes it so that other grant opportunities may be available when it's time for actual construction. And then for the ARPA fund, the board approved a business ARPA grant program that allows businesses to take advantage of ARPA funds to either reimburse them for expenses incurred over the pandemic or for improvements that help with sustainability and also expansion to their floor capacities to promote social distancing. And this is that remaining fund balance from the grant program this year carrying over into next year. And then again, $100 million budgeted for this surface improvement program. And I'm sorry, 1 million budgeted for.
I wish we had
That'd be great.
For the service improvement program and the water main bid overages, again, dealing with the inflationary costs of the results of those bids for those projects.
So I'll pause here again. Any other questions regarding the general fund and all the projects there before we move to water and sewer operating fund? All right, seeing none, we'll continue on to water and sewer operating fund.
So here we have a overview of the 2022 projected and 2023 budget for the water sewer operating fund. For 2023, we're looking at a 1.3% increase in revenues and a 4.5% increase in expenditures over where we expect 22 to end. We continue with a budgetary plan to spend down reserves in this fund. Reserves, though, are expected to stay above the board's policy of 25% of expenditures. Revenues are relatively flat despite that increase in the water sewer rates of approximately 2.4% in DuPage County and 3% in Cook. The water is budgeted to decrease, the water usage is budgeted to decrease 1% from our estimate of 2022 usage, as we expect residents to replace appliances with water saving appliances and find other ways to conserve water. We've used this method in the past for the water rate studies, always predicting 1% decrease in water usage. Electricity costs, a budgeted 12-cent DuPage Water Commission rate increase, and personnel costs drive that 4.5% increase in expenditures. The water sewer capital budget also calls for a spend down of reserves. But we know from experience that not all projects will be completed in the time frame planned or for the dollar amount that is budgeted. The only costs that are 100% certain in this fund are the debt service payments through the year for bonds and IEPA loans, which total $1.7 million. And the large projects planned for both the Devlin and Boderman treatment plants have become dramatically more expensive due to inflation. Also, the water main replacement program will be more expensive than usual based on increased construction costs and the lead service line replacement on Maple Avenue. A lead service line replacement policy will be discussed at the next couple of regular board meetings, and to kind of get the policy from the board as we work through this. The various stages of replacement of 3 lift stations are also included in the budget, including the design of 2 lift station replacements and the replacement of the Chesapeake lift station next year. Some of the identified projects include the water main replacement program coming to Maple Avenue and Cumberland Trail. The initial engineering for the expansion of the Devlin wastewater treatment plant, which is a large project that will require significant financial resources. There's also a redundant electrical feed from ComEd planned at Devlin. There's only 1 feed, and if that goes down, the plant will go down. So we're having ComEd put that redundant feed in. The initial engineering for the phosphorus removal program at Boderman waste treatment plant is planned. This is another large project that will have to occur at Devlin as well. So these both plants will have the phosphorus removal projects. And finally, the collection system projects, including flow monitoring in the Devlin Basin for inflow and infiltration that brings clean stormwater to the treatment plant, will be done. And again, as I said, including the lift station replacements. Some of our future looking decisions, the large looming capital projects at both plants have increased from an estimated $87 million to $100 million. As inflation continues to impact construction projects. And again, these are estimates as of today. Funding will have to come from multiple sources to complete these projects ahead of regulatory deadlines, including borrowing, grants, forgiveness of debts, and rate increases. In addition, stormwater projects paid for out of the General Capital Projects Fund will need significant investment as well to alleviate flooding in sections of town.
With that, I think staff, are there any questions about the water and sewer operating fund as well as the water and sewer capital fund? Bruce?
Not so much as questions, but on slide 13, we kind of glossed over this, and I think it's warranted to kind of highlight First of all, it's on the DuPage Water Commission. They're the ones who are increasing some of the things. We did not pass some of the rate increases from last year. So we are now having to do that because we're going to get rate increases from this year and last year. So we are now assuming that. So that's going into some of this rate increase.
And I would add, they're passing along costs that the city of Chicago has passed along to them to buy water as well. So.
Right, so it's just a trickle down, and we did absorb that from last year. The other is, the last time we actually increased the rate was
The water sewer rates last year.
last year.
But we held it for 2 years prior to that. Well, for a total of 3.
So we're still trying to catch up to what we had alleviated years back. And now with all these additional construction costs and the additional needs, these are why these are going up. The reason I'm highlighting this slide is this is probably the primary slide that most of our residents will understand. Most of our residents will ask and question. So we just need to be prepared when that comes around.
Well, and I would add to that, if we go to slide 17. $100 million is a real figure, and that's a sobering figure. And that's something that's why we're going to have a lot of conversations next year with the community to discuss how do we do this appropriately and responsibly. Water rates have to go up this year because there's no way we're going to have $100 million in projects completed on the deadlines that have been established by the state and need to be done. And so we're not going to increase water rates all the way to pay for this. We understand that that's not feasible, but that's why we're going to have a lot of community engagement. And so we're working actively with staff to have something in February or March that will be heavily publicized. We're investing in polling technology so that way residents who can't participate will be able to be a part of that conversation. But the thing is, as we go through the budget, as I think Tom and Brian noted throughout it, there's a lot of money that's restricted in what we can use it for. We can't take all of our revenue and just throw it into water and sewer projects. We have state laws, federal laws that require certain funds to go to certain types of projects. And so while it might seem easy to say, cut the Rose Parade or cut this or that, we're using funds we can't use for other things on those things. We're using TIF funds to fund some of these beautification efforts, but those can't necessarily be used towards sewer treatment, expansion or phosphorus removal. So while we look at the general pool, the money can't go where we just want it to go all the time. And so I think part of it is to make sure community understands what our limitations are, but also what tools may be at our disposal or could be at our disposal to help address this. I think very well made point, Bruce.
I want to just highlight, that's the reason why we had to create the tourism fund, because there's a perfect example, real life example, where we are getting some additional revenues that we hadn't anticipated from the hotel and the success of the hotel, which is great. We have to use that related to that hotel and not just go and say, well, I'll use that for the streets or the sewer and so forth. So as you said, we do have some limitations, and we are going to need the whole community to help us identify what we're going to do to solve this $100 million gap we're about to face.
And while this is sobering, I think we're on very good footings. We're not in a crisis situation like we were during the recession. We can have a deliberate conversation and put together a plan, and we can walk and talk and chew gum at the same time, I think, here. And I think I'm very eager to have that conversation with the community because I think we will be able to work through and have a great solution. So Trustee Domke, I saw your hand, and then Trustee Delaplana.
Yeah, David, I don't know if it's appropriate at this time to mention that Turner Park retention or water retention area that might need to be dredged out. What is our plan for that? Is like maybe 2024, or
So
you're doing a survey of some sort, right?
yes, two things on that front. We're awaiting the results of a stormwater study from our relationship with the Park District. Turner Pond's primary uses is stormwater retention. And so we're having a study conducted that we should be getting results soon that would help us understand what capacity we need for that to be considered healthy. By the suggestion of Trustee Brickshire, we'll be putting together just a collaborative group with both staff from both the Park District, the village. I will have trustee representation there, and I've encouraged them to have elected commissioner representation as well, so we can have an open conversation about the results received and what we think is feasible or not. I think given some of the things that are out there on the horizon, we have to look at the data that's given to us, make a good decision, but also make sure that we understand we're investing our money where it's appropriate.
Yeah, but any development of our parcel there across from Southern Cafe would drain into that reservoir. So. that would be right.
Potentially, because when you look at that, they actually have and we're getting off topic, but I wouldn't state that as a fact.
There's all sorts of ways to deal with stormwater management,
Okay.
as we've come to learn. Trustee Delpana.
I go back to this $100 million figure we're talking about, and for the record, I just want it to be known that that's nothing that this board or prior boards ignored or pushed out. That's just because the standards have been changed.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Yeah, Bruce.
We have one other comment. So we've been talking about this and it seems like, oh my gosh, the dark cloud is coming. I want to emphasize that the village here is actually in a very strong financial position. If you look at our reserves, you look at where we're at, we have enough money not only to continue to do the projects, but also have some in case of an emergency or something should happen. And we are also still looking to continue to pay pensions and the like. So we're not deferring costs. So again, the village is in a strong financial position. It's just there's work that has to be done. And this is one of those things.
Absolutely. Last call before I turn it back to staff to give us an updated, I believe, scorecard. All right. We're gonna have to zoom in on that.
Okay, so that presentation was based on the proposed budget that was published and brought to you a couple weeks ago. Since then, we've had a few changes as Brian brings this up. So the first one is the general fund. We got word, as you all know, that the mental health board grant came in at $101,000 when we had budgeted $125,000. So we reduced revenues by $24,000. But then on the flip side, the Axon contract for body cameras, the body worn cameras and the in-car cameras came in at almost $29,000 less than we had budgeted. That was $100,000. So we included that. Property taxes. So Cook County, as I've been mentioning in my treasurer's report, Cook County was very slow with getting us the EAV. We received the preliminary reports the very end of last week. So I believe it was Friday morning that I got them. I was able to work up the figures. And so I was close, but not close enough. Property taxes that will be levied will be about $27,000 less than we threw into the budget. Actually, the EAV for Cook County decreased by $8 million, which was a surprise. So I'm going to try to find out what was the driver for that. So it went from 108 million to 100 million. And then finally, since the property taxes came in lower, we removed the police department break room upgrade project. That was 25,000, and we'll bring that forward at mid-year budget. So that's been discussed with the police department. They were okay with that. And we were able to bring that in. So we went from the proposed budget of $19,885 revenues over expenditures, and now we're at $22,565, roughly the same as where we started, just a couple changes thrown in there. Underwater sewer operating, there were 4 small changes. All of these were items that we expected to finish in 2022. But now we took them out of there and we're going to rebudget them in 2023. Lab testing in the water division for the water that I believe that we pump out. And then 3 safety devices in the sewer division, the life rings, the davit arm bases and arms, and some lock upgrades. That was just a total of 26,000 difference. Capital Projects Fund, there were again 2 items that we were hoping to finish by the end of this year, but that has not turned out to be the case. There's some leftover building, the Public Works building furniture that is still on order, 24,500. And then the gear lockers that were ordered, they will not be able to be delivered by the end of this year, and that's just about 35,000. The ARPA fund, we made a change. If you remember, we discussed the water connection incentive program. So we added 100,000 in to the budget. This is to encourage people to connect to our water system. Gives them an incentive that I believe will match what the county has done. And then since the ARPA fund is a little bit different than the other funds, when we spend the money, we recognize the grant revenue. It's an accounting trick. It's just something I have to do. So I recognize the revenue at the same time. And then finally, the Water Sewer Capital Projects Fund. Again, some projects that we expected in 2022, but we were just rebudgeting. So the Devlin entrance gates, Devlin HVAC screening, Bottomman entrance gates. Pardon me, I put grates on there. I don't know why I did that. And the Dover Court manhole project have all been rebudgeted in 2023.
Any questions from the board, Bruce?
So, starting backwards, those projects that you just talked about, we never started those this year. We had to defer them from this year to next because of some reasons.
Supply mainly. One of them is the Dover Court manhole was just some difficulties in that area with the sewer. But the other three, I believe, we just haven't gotten them. So we haven't gotten the materials for that.
Nothing started, so that's it.
Right.
That brings me then to the question about the furniture and gear lockers. Since we have actually purchased those or bought those in 2022, can we accrue those dollars for 2022, or do you only deal with it on delivery?
On delivery. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on scorecard? Pretty mild compared to what we've seen before, so.
Yes.
I think we continue to be subjected to the issues with just labor and supply chain shortages in general, so that will continue to be a element of our budgets, I think, in the short term at least. Anything else, Brian or Tom?
Not from either of us.
Any other discussion from the board about the budget? Seeing none, I know we will continue to provide a updated scorecard as we lead up to the formal approval of the budget should things change. If things do come up between now and then, please reach out to staff or myself so that we can address those questions. But I appreciate all the work that all the departments put into it. I know this is now the second year. It feels like we've approved half the budget in advance, given that we've had to give authorization on purchasing just to get in line. So it makes these processes a little bit more streamlined than they typically have been in the past, but I think that just speaks to our agility to adapt to the realities of our economy today. And, I think ending on the note that, essentially the 2024 budget starts early next year. Staff is always working on the budget very early, but I think this is the first time we're going to be engaging the community essentially month one of the next year to have a long-term conversation. And I think that speaks to the transparency and the willingness of us board and our strategic priorities to make sure we're soliciting public feedback and making the best strategic decision going forward. So I know it's not a sexy topic for us to do, but we're going to do our best to get everyone excited and into the accounting with us next year. So appreciate the effort.
I have one other.
Yeah.
So when we propose the next scorecard, you mentioned one of them we're going to be looking at is at our midterm budget. Can we identify what other ones we might want to kind of consider for that midterm when we always review it? Because we always usually have a list of items. This year we only have the one. And so I know we're going to be tight, but it would be good just to know so that as things change and dynamics, we can have some insights.
Yeah, we'll have suggestions like obviously pensions, the pension transfer or additional. And then probably for the parking lot operating, those would be the two that we know for sure. And then probably another capital project fund transfer. But to be honest, there's, you mentioned sexy, there wasn't a lot of sexy things in this budget and not a lot of things that we kept out. So we were in a pretty good, compared to 5 years ago when we had a ton of items that we deferred.
I think though, to your point, we can probably come up with a list of some projects and whatnot that could come up. I know the other thing I would just add is let's add just revenue. We don't have to put a number to it, but I know we have some pending proposals to the board that haven't been formally approved yet that could generate additional revenue for us next year that we're doing the right thing and conservatively not budgeting for it at this point because we have nothing to go off of, but that is a reality.
This way we have the insights early and then we can always look at it again like we always do. And then I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said the pensions. we always pay what we need to pay. You're referring to additional because we have made a decision as a board to sometimes pay more into those pension funds to help bring that debt down. And so that's what you were referring to as a midterm, is look at maybe some additional payments we could make.
Correct, because that is the policy. We do have a financial policy for reviewing last year and then proposing increased additional contributions to those funds.
But it didn't look like you increased the money to the pensions this year. Is that?
They were, and that was due to the actuarial reports. So the recommended contributions for the police pension was about the same. There wasn't very much difference in there. However, in the fire pension, we significantly increased that because of the budgeted staffing, the increase in the number of firefighters. So that was purposeful. And also as part of our policy and some discussions that we had, we were changing each year and evaluating the assumptions that go into the police and fire pensions. So making sure that they're financially sound. So that would increase the contributions as well. But these increased contributions that we've been doing have certainly helped.
Any closing remarks? If not, we'll move on to other businesses. Any trustee have other business tonight? I'll just do two quick announcements. So we'll be hosting a joint open workshop with the Roselle Public Library this Thursday right here at Village Hall at 7 p.m. This is to just discuss and solicit feedback from the community on the recent study we did on the Prospect Street corridor as a part of our kind of Main Street re-envisioning, as well as some information that the library district has been working on as well. And then finally, I just wanted to, on the record, just express our organization's sympathy to our administrator's family on the passing of his father. He was a longtime public servant, serving 22 years for the Carroll Stream Village as manager. So our heartfelt thoughts go out to his family and hope that they're able to heal with time. So with that being the case, I will ask, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, I'll second.
all those in favor, please signify as aye.
Yes.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions?